Coffee Pot Conversations.
Bonjour et bienvenue to Coffee Pot Conversations, the podcast about Paris that's explored by someone who takes walking very seriously and planning far less so. My name is Paul, and today this is episode 5.6, L'Académie Française. That's pretty much it. For those of you that are new here, I just go on. Today's episode's about 15, or today's conversation is about 15 minutes long. It's just about the Académie Française on this occasion, but it's not always strictly about the topic. It does meander through the streets of Paris like a flaneur. Also, topics just take my interest, and I go, oh, I like that concept. And that's pretty much, again, sort of what happened here, although I do try and keep it a bit on track. I'm currently in my favourite coffee shop in this part of town, so I will have a quick cup of Java. Costa Coffee. They don't sponsor the show, but they do let me I can say recording pace. They leave me alone, which is nice. So, for those of you that have been watching for the last few episodes, you may notice something a little bit different about me this week. But more on that a bit later, which I won't remember. I'm just unsleeving my sleeve. I'm rolling my sleeve. So yeah, as for those of you that are new here, you will notice that this part isn't scripted at all. The next part of the news is the conversation on this episode is also scripted. And stick around and you'll see what happens after that if you're an existing listener. Why? No, seriously, thank you. So that's it. So now I'm just going to hand you over to Paul with the news. Paul. Thanks, Paul. The Musée de Colony successfully launched its Unicorns exhibition on March the 10th, 2026. Far from the neon pink aesthetics of modern pop culture, the exhibition offers a rigorous intellectual deep dive into the medieval obsession with the beast. And that's the unicorn, not the devil. It traces a creature's evolution from a symbol of untamable power in antiquity to refined captive heart of the Lady and the Unicorn tapestries. It isn't just a museum show. It's an autopsy of a 5-century-long collective hallucination. The exhibition, Scratchy Scratchy Arm, remains open until 12th of July, and the opening week saw record crowds of medievalists and people who just really like woven wall hangings. The Sorte Ormée concluded its 16th edition just a few days ago, back on the 22nd. The Grand Palais, in all its restored glass and steel glory, provided a backdrop for the world's elite show jumpers. It remained the peak of Parisian social excellence, a place where the horses were frequently better dressed than the spectators. The Frenchman, Simon Delestre, sent the home crowd into a frenzy, claiming victory in a prestigious Grand Prix Ormée, riding Cayman Jolly Jumper. On the evening of Wednesday the 18th of March, the Great Mosque of Paris held the Nuit de Doute. The religious commission gathered to observe the lunar cycle and officially announced that Eid would fall on Friday 20th of March. It was a moment of profound cultural gravity that existed entirely outside the frantic pace of the city's tourist traps. The announcement led to a massive surge in the sale of Croûte de Gazelle and honey-soaked pastries across the 5th arrondissement as the fast was broken. You ready? L'exposition extraordinaire, une production de l'association de maîtres, is based on an original idea by Frédéric Beau, Valhorna's creative mind. An event has taken over Galerie Joseph in the Marais. It's an international spectacle that treats the egg not as breakfast, but as a perfect form. 94 global artisans, including 10 young talents of tomorrow, explore the intelligence of the hand, with Pierre Hermé and Patrick Roger as honorary presidents, and culinary titan Anne-Sophie Pic as godmother. And this is where the boundary between craftsmanship and fine art officially dissolves into a puddle of tempered ganache. Supported by Valhorna, the association is currently seeking recognition as a public interest organisation. It's a serious endeavour to redefine the art of matter, occurring perfectly in time for the Easter holidays. Now on the 12th of April, 40,000 entrants will be competing against each other and themselves to reach the finish line of the Paris Marathon. Yeah, another one I'm missing, but you know what? With France winning the Six Nations again, Warriors teams topping the division as champions, and my push into rugby refereemanship, it's more than enough for me. Plus, I have the ideal home exhibition with Never the Boy the day before. You know me in priorities. We interrupt this news bulletin to bring a special news bulletin. Over to Paul. Sorry, that's right, we interrupt this news broadcast to bring a special news broadcast. And apologies for any horizontal line that's not appeared horizontal during the entire episode. After 12 years of Anne Hidalgo's polarising but undoubtedly green reign, the white smoke has finally risen over the Seine. As of late night, Sunday 22nd of March, Paris has officially chosen its new Master of Ceremonies. Emmanuel Grégoire, the socialist candidate and former First Deputy, claimed victory in the second round of the municipal elections. Grégoire secured approximately 52% of the vote, successfully fending off a fierce challenge from the Conservative and current Minister of Culture, your friend and ours, Rachida Dati, who trailed at roughly 40%. In a move that was either a triumphant victory lap or a very calculated PR stunt, Grégoire arrived at City Hall on a bicycle to greet the outgoing Hidalgo. It was a clear sign to the anti-car brigade that the cycle lanes are here to stay, much to the annoyance of every taxi driver currently stuck in a permanent loop around the Place de la Concorde. So, what does this actually mean for the beloved sustained capital? Well, in short, continuity with a younger face. Grégoire campaigned on a vibrant Paris platform, promising to keep the pedals turning on Hidalgo's environmental policies. You know, Anne's plan, or some called it Anne's bike reign of terror. Nobody called it that. This was while trying to mend the fractured relationship between the city's left-wing coalition and the more frustrated business districts. Dati, meanwhile, has conceded defeat, but warned that Paris remains a divided city, while she awaits her Sarkozy-connected trial in September. It's a massive win for the Socialist Party, especially as they've managed to hold the capital just a year before the 2027 presidential race. If you thought the Olympics were the peak of Parisian political drama, buckle up. We've just handed the keys of the apartment to the guy who helped renovate it. While the results are conclusive and Dati has acknowledged the result, the official installation of the mayor by the newly elected Council of Paris won't happen for a few more days. Until that formal vote, he's technically mayor-elect. While the public vote on March the 22nd told us who the people wanted, the council vote is a legal seal. The session is chaired by the oldest member of the council, the doyen d'âge, who oversees a secret ballot. Given Grégoire's solid majority, this is largely a formal victory lap. This cannot happen before the first Friday or after the first Sunday that the vote took place, meaning the weekend. I have had a source confirm that a victory bike that we rode in on was available, but we are still unsure if it was a one-off payment or part of an annual subscription. And now back to Paul in the studio. We will probably actually just head you straight over to Rory. Paul, back in the studio. Going to hand over to Rory. Probably sitting over there. Was over there? Who knows? Thanks, Paul. That was, well, I don't know where to go with that. Maybe more next episode. In the meantime, enjoy the conversation.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
How does one start to talk about one of the finest academies in Paris? The first thing to do would be naturally go to the website, académiefrançaise.fr, so académie-française.fr, which is great. But as we all know, my French really isn't up to much. My 1,344-day streak on Duolingo still only has me at level 18, which is pretty much deemed as A1, I think. Anyway, the ability to ask and answer simple questions, and that's on Rory's account. My account is simply me playing chess every day. It may be time I go back to my French today learning. Maybe whilst I'm running instead of listening to Sabrina Carpenter or Dua Lipa, which also means that it may be time I go back to running. I was sitting in my favourite little coffee shop in Greenwich looking at the website, and I honestly couldn't find a little button to translate the website. So instead I hit the translate to English option in the Chrome menu. Be done with that way. All joking aside, I can make out a few little bits on there, like searching the 9th edition of the dictionary, their links for contact details, press contact details, legal notices, search section, and human resources. There are also options for the institution, the French language, the dictionary, and maybe something to do with teaching, as the word is pédagogique. That's a lovely word, isn't it? Pédagogique, 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 pédagogique. I don't know. Someone's going to have to write in or leave a voice note. voicenote.anenglishmaninparis.blog. Let me know how it should be sound. Pédagogique or pédagogique, pédagogique. Anyway, I don't remember where I first learned of the Academy, nor when I first thought I saw it. But if there's one thing this podcast has taught me, it's to be open to learning new things and never stop asking questions. And also to never number things until you've finished building a list of things you've learned. I do remember when I first crossed the bridge that leads onto the Academy. It's on the Quai de Conté, just by the Pont des Arts. And that's the bridge that used to house the Lovelocks. I used to go take photos on the bridge coming from Quai François Mitterrand and looking directly at the building where the Académie Française now is. It's also this bridge where I heard the pianist Jean Vittori playing a little jazz. This is a piece of Parisian magic that unless you take the time to flaneur around, you'd simply miss, or not even appreciate. Paris can't be rushed. I certainly would have missed him had it not have been for the magnificent building that took me in awe and made me take a photo, wrongly thinking, or at least in part, that this was the Académie Française. If I hadn't noticed the green street sign of Rue Mazarine a few seconds beforehand, I would have simply crossed the bridge oblivious to my surroundings. To be totally transparent in this story, if I hadn't have been with Nev, I'd have doubled back to miss this. And for even more clarification, if I hadn't been meeting up with another woman, I'd never have been here in the first place. That other woman, incidentally, was the last guest I interviewed for the November interviews back in November 2023. It was my coffee pot conversation with Nev, and the last was the irrepressible Claudine Hemingway at Bleu Blanc Rouge, ClaudineHemingway.com. So, back to the story of what I learned. Showing that I was slightly miseducated and the Académie Française isn't a building that I'd been taking photos of for all those years. It was, in fact, Le Palais de l'Institut. Now, I can go into detail about Le Palais or even spiral off into other palaces, or is it Palais, pluralised as is Palais, off into the other buildings. All right, let's do it then. Let's check the 9th edition of the Dictionnaire de l'Académie Française. Okay, so I did type in Palais and was given the following, although translated by Google Chrome. Palace, masculine noun. 11th century from the Latin Palatium or Palatine, all of Rome, where the residence of Augustus stood and where all the Roman emperors lived after him. From the imperial era, the Palatium was used as a common noun meaning palace. Etymology done with the definitions are: 1. A large urban residence of a sovereign, a prince, a head of state, a bishop, a high dignitary of the church, as opposed to a castle, a residence in the countryside. 2. The former royal or seigneurial residence transformed into a museum or housing various services and whose name has been preserved. 3. The courthouse, the public building where the courts established in the city sit. A second definition tells us that the word palais also means 1. Internal upper partition of the oral cavity in the form of a vault covered with a thick and dense mucous membrane and which separates the mouth from the nasal cavities. I believe it's the equivalent of our word palate, and shocked that I get to use the word mucous membrane as well as nasal cavities on a podcast. But it also means the swelling located on the free part of the petals of a certain flower with irregular corolla, more or less closing the entrance to the tube formed by these petals by welding to their base. I have very little knowledge of botany, aside from the fact that I love daffodils, and the words chlorophyll, photosynthesis and osmosis. So, no show of a pluralised version of the word palais. I do know that le palais becomes le palais, which means I'm still none the wiser and I'll stick to palais rather than palais. Back to the story of the palais, and it turns out that my limited knowledge of French literature means that what I thought was merely the Académie Française is in fact home to also the Académie Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres, Académie des Sciences, Académie des Beaux-Arts, and the Académie des Sciences Morales et Politiques. This is the Institute of France. It is down to the President of the French Republic to protect it, whilst it encourages research, creativity, and since the late 1800s maintains an extensive portfolio of architectural treasures and collections. But we're not here for that. We're here to hear about l'Académie Française. Café Crème. A whole episode, at least one, will be covering the topic of the Louvre. But for now, I'll mention that from 1672 to 1805, the Academy held their meetings there. It was during Napoleon's rule that they moved their headquarters to the Palais de l'Institut in the 6th arrondissement, just across the river from the Louvre, where it still stands today in a building complex commissioned by Cardinal Mazarin in 1661 and designed by Louis le Vau and named vastly connected to King Louis XIV. A far cry from the salons held at Hotel de Rambouillet, leading to Valentia Conrad's home. Where is the best place to start? For me, it's normally the beginning, although, yeah, I often start in the middle. Jumping into a mishmash of issues, let's just start with Cardinal Richelieu, the star of his own episode still to come on Coffee Pot Conversations, and let's look at his role in the Académie Française. It was back in January 1635 that the mission of the Academy was formalised. This stemmed from Richelieu's knowledge that a group of clever people were meeting to discuss literary matters. Wanting to be a part of this gang and to continue, as well as improve upon the work already established, Richelieu nudged King Louis XIII into allowing the creation of the Académie Française. Despite the meetings being held by these 9 intellectuals at the home of the King's secretary and advisor, Valentin Conrad, Cardinal Richelieu's name is synonymous with the Académie Française because of his involvement in formalising the establishment. Valentin Conrad became the first permanent secretary, so all was not lost or forgotten. It simply meant that Richelieu became the protector, and his name is the one that's synonymous. But what was the actual aim of the Academy? Surely it wasn't to simply sit, read books and discuss them. Not in the slightest. Its role is to continue to the improvement and influence of the language and literary arts, to give rules to our language, make it pure, eloquent and capable of dealing with arts and science. I am of course referring to the French language, and Richelieu knew the importance of culture and heritage. Richelieu took academics, created a base number of 40, no more, no less, and hired them based on their skills and unusual for the time, not in their social standing. Cynics may believe this was an important decision so as to not have anyone in a position to undermine him. That may be more down to Dumas' painting of him in his novels rather than an actual fact, but it still can't be ruled out altogether. In 1635, the Académie Française was formally established. In 1638, Jean Chapelain came up with the idea of writing the first French dictionary. Now this was a major task and it wasn't completed until 1694. We're currently on the 9th official version of this dictionary. Jean Chapelain was a poet and a critic, which is slightly ironic considering his own poem about Jean of Arc, La Pucelle, written in 1656. I had a little read of this sonnet in an English translation, and being honest, it's a kind of trifle I would have been served up during my master's degree to read, and then told to justify why it was good. I hate a challenge I just can't win. So on a positive side, a 14-line sonnet is better than a 19-line villanelle in this instance. One example of a villanelle is by Sylvia Plath called Mad Girl's Love Story, written in 1951, the year my mum was born. And unlike my mum, Sylvia, that's Plath, not my nan, went to Paris 5 times within 9 months. I've done it 4 times in 7 months. You crack a jack, that's quite a bit. No wonder I had withdrawal symptoms waiting these last 9 months. So, whilst it was Jean Chapelain that came up with the idea, it was started by Vaugelet. In 1674, 20 years before its completion, King Louis XIV had banned the publication of any dictionary before the official one was published, which held around 18,000 words and contained general definitions and examples of simple use. But not only that, the dictionary focused on spellings. The suppression of etymological and unpronounced consonants, the restriction of the letter Y, and a circumflex accent is placed to note the disappearance of a consonant. Hence, hotel originally was hostel, The focus was to be based on pronunciation. It wasn't always plain sailing, as I'm finding out about French history. Because of the French Revolution, everything is up in the air. People of power and influence were constantly looking over their shoulders. And on August the 5th, 1793, the Academy held its last meeting with the director, Abbé Morellet, keeping a founding act and archives at his house. 3 days later, a decree of the convention abolishes all the old royal academies. Just under a year after that, the Academy's property is confiscated, and another year goes by before the National Institute of Sciences and Arts replaces all the old academies. A little over 5 years roll on, and after some new decrees and reshuffling, the literature and fine arts arm of the National Institute of Sciences and Arts moves from 48 members back to 40 members and is renamed as French Language and Literature. I should have mentioned that there were 3 classes of the National Institute of Sciences of Arts. So we had the physical and the physical and mathematical sciences, which had 60 members, the moral and political sciences, which had 36 members, and the literature and fine arts, which had 48 members. The moral and political sciences were abolished, and then the literature and fine arts were split into 3, creating a new total of 4 classes. These were then settled into the former Collège des Quatre Nations, which is where the Académie Française still hold their formal meetings. In 1893, on January the 19th, the first female candidate stood for election to become a member of the Immortals, the 40 people holding court. The Academy declared the candidate, Pauline Savary, inadmissible. It wasn't until March the 6th, 1980, that Marguerite Yourcenar was the first woman to be elected in the first round of voting, 20 votes to 36. October 21st, 1999, had Hélène Kerr d'Ancros become the first female permanent secretary. She sadly passed away on the 5th of August 2023 at the age of 94. And today, as it stands, out of the 33 Immortals that are sitting in the green coats, only 5 are women. The longest standing member sitting is in seat 23. It's Parisian-born Pierre Rosenberg, with Immortals 743 being Alain Aspect, elected in 2025. He sits in armchair 22 and he can polish his Nobel Prize in Physics. The Immortals do a fair amount of work, but predominantly we only think of their involvement in the evolution or non-evolution of the French language. In the latest edition of the 9th edition, around 25,000 extra words have been included, bringing the total to nearly 60,000 listed words. And it's not just about keeping things spelt correctly, but also to stop modern Anglicisms from gaining a foothold, as well as other non-French vocabulary. I did a little non-scientific experiment by using a computer. My audio à la demande can also be called a podcast. Clickbait can be called a piège à clic, according to the Academy, but also either a pâte-à-clic or put-à-clic. When I'm taking those nice videos of the Tour Eiffel, transitioning from day to night or back again, not only is the hyper-accéléré, but it's also a laps du temps or chronotographie, known in English as a time-lapse photograph. That's a video. 2 additional words I discovered on this journey of Francophile English words are for pop-up shop and food truck, boutique éphémère and camion restaurant. Now, I'm sure I've covered what éphémère means to me in either a previous podcast episode or a blog post that I've written. If you find it at anenglishmaninparis.blog, please do let me know. Blog at anenglishmaninparis.blog. There we go. So, all that's really left for me to say, unless you guys have questions for me, is a little piece of French